welcome everybody who have joined so far, and I'm sure there will be others joining in a little while because the numbers are still going up quite fast. And thank you all for the interest you're showing in this this wonderful seminar we will be holding. So I'm Alison Hill. I am chair of Low Carbon Oxford North, and I'm doing the introduction, but there's several of us here from Low Carbon Oxford North who will be supporting the whole process and doing the recording, etc., etc. Just to say, we are recording this webinar and we're saving the chat so that we'll be able to capture questions and discussions that follow up from this. And we will let you know afterwards where to find the chat and to find the recording. The purpose of today is to raise awareness and understanding of the impacts of sustainable fashion, highlighting potential solutions and encouraging individual action. And we'll be exploring a bit about individual action as we come towards the end of this session. So a little bit about Low Carbon Oxford North. We're a charity that offers practical ideas, information and activities to help people shrink their carbon footprint. This is our 10th anniversary year, and marking that, we are putting on some speaker events as well as lots of other activities. And this event is the first one of our speaker events, and we're really pleased to welcome Kim and Stephen, who will be talking about sustainable fashion. So who is here now? One of the things when I take off this screen, we're going to do a brief poll to see where you're all from, how many of you are from Oxford and Oxfordshire and elsewhere, and also why you're here. So that'll be the immediate thing we do after this. But just quickly to say that Kim Polgreen, who's a sustainability educator and is part of Low Carbon Oxford North, will be talking about the environmental impacts of the fashion industry. And Stephen Cawley, who is the former head of sustainability at John Lewis, will tell us about what John Lewis has been doing to tackle this really huge question of creating sustainable fashion. We're then going to have a question and answer sessions and also hope to have some breakout groups, which is a first for me using Zoom, to allow a bit of reflection, personal action, and develop our questions. And again, we'll be recording all of that so that we'll be able to look at what are the issues that everybody kind of takes out of this workshop. And then a final wrap up with questions and answers as following on from the breakout rooms. So I'm unsharing, and then I'm going to hand over to Julia to do the polls. So this is a poll about where you're. So we've got 2 people from outside the UK, which is wonderful, and nearly half from elsewhere than Oxford and Oxfordshire. So thank you. Julia, do you want to do the second poll?
Yep.
Then our two speakers are Kim, who spotlighting here, and Stephen here. So welcome you, and thank you so much, all of you. I'd like to hand over to Kim, therefore, who will introduce herself and introduce the session with talking about the environmental impacts of the fashion industry. I'll put a spotlight on you now, Kim. There we go.
Great. Hello. Thank you all for coming. Gosh, you're a very professional crowd. I think I better just go and redo my slides if you don't mind. I'll just be 5 minutes. No, it's great that everybody's interested in sustainability and fashion. It's a topic that really excites me. I'm fairly new to it. I'm not an expert. I've just done an awful lot of reading around it, largely because I was going to teach about it on a summer school this summer, but to teenagers, but that's not going to happen because of COVID. My background is I've worked in business and sustainability for a while, and I've also worked in education, and now I work in education and sustainability, which seems like a good resolution to all of that. Sustainable fashion is one of the most energizing topics I've come across in this whole sort of climate change, climate disaster field. So it's a fun one to work on. And I'm really excited to share with you what I've learned so far. So I'm going to share my screen. If I can work, my mouse comes back to life. Where's our mouse? That one. Did that work? Slideshow. There. Can you see my screen? Give me some thumbs up. Now I'm actually looking at my notes on another screen, so maybe slightly stilted, but bear with me. So yeah, for a few minutes I'm going to share some of my favourite things that I found out, and then we can have a bit of a Q&A, and then I'm going to hand over to Stephen to do a much more professional presentation on all the wonderful things that that I've learned about John Lewis, mainly from him, and that he's going to tell you about, and lots more indeed. So now, how do I move on my slide? So I thought I would start with this photo. You can wave if you've seen this photo, but it's from Monday's news. These are the queues that outside, as you can see, Nike and Primark in London. I think these people are much more concerned about fashion than they are about health. I thought that was quite amazing, and it certainly flies in the face of all those lovely articles that we're reading about how people weren't consuming anymore and COVID was changing everything. I think for a lot of people it wasn't changing anything at all, other than their desire for Nike and Primark went up. So why should environmentalists think about fashion? Well, if you've been sort of in the field for a while, thinking about sustainability issues, you're probably aware that in the fashion supply chain, there are an awful lot of social, human issues, perhaps mostly in our mind from Rana Plaza collapse, the factory that collapsed in 2013 in Bangladesh, where over 1,100 people were, turn my phone off, that's not helpful. 1,100 people died, 2,500 people injured. And so it's, if you saw those pictures of back then, something has changed, some things have improved, but not everything has improved, and there's still an awful lot of deprivation and hardship in the fashion supply chain. It's hard, I find, to go into a shop and buy anything without having some of those pictures in the back of my mind. But from an environmental perspective, there's also quite an interesting story behind what we call fast fashion. So there's an awful lot of data on this, and I picked a couple of sources. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and I'll come back to, they're a really good source of information around all sorts of sustainability things, but they've got a project called Make Fashion Circular, and WRAP, which is the Waste Resources Action Programme, I think it's called. So I find it useful in sustainability to be able to parrot a few facts. So I've tried to put in a few facts that one might go around parroting after this. And I've divided them into the four areas of climate change, waste, pollution, and resource use. So on climate change, I think the most startling fact that those of us who worked in climate change for a while perhaps didn't realise, and that fashion accounts for about 10% of our annual carbon emissions. And that's more than all international flights and maritime combined. So that's quite a big chunk, and one reason why we should focus on it. In terms of waste, that's a bit tragic as well. In the last 15 years, production has doubled while we actually wear things for many fewer times. 150 billion items a year for 7.5 billion people. That's quite a lot. We're now only wearing things an average of 12 times, where we used to wear them, I think, over 60 times or something. And I know some people who buy things and then throw them away without even washing them. I mean, they just go straight in the bin after one wear. Half of fast fashion is disposed of in under a year. That means 1 truckload of clothes across the world waste is landfilled or incinerated every second. Only 1% of it is recycled into new clothing. 75% is landfilled or incinerated. And then in terms of resource use, textile production uses 4% of global fresh water. And as is a good one to remember, it takes as much water to make 1 t-shirt as a person drinks in 2 years. And if you like more facts, it takes over 300 million swimming pools to make all the clothes in the UK for a year. And in terms of pollution, fashion is the second most polluting industry. It causes 20% of global water pollution. No prizes for guessing which is the most polluting industry, that's oil and gas. A quarter of the world's chemicals are used in textiles. And in terms of microplastics, we were very excited about microbeads, but actually washing our clothes, if you put your fleece in the washing machine, it's contributing to over 500,000 tons of plastic microfibers into the ocean every year, by more than 50 billion plastic bottles, equivalent of. So yeah, we should still worry about plastic bottles, but we should also worry about washing our fleeces. And in my research, I found some good evidence that perhaps washing them is not necessary after all. So yeah, so there's quite a big environmental footprint. So it's definitely something for us environmentalists to get excited about. Yes, why should we get excited? Well, the media is very excited about sustainable fashion. These are some of the headlines I've been gathering over the last 6 months. A lot of them are quite recent. There's an awful lot of fashion journalists getting into sustainable fashion. These are from all sorts of things, from The Guardian through to fashion magazines, Cosmopolitan, etc., etc. The Guardian's very good at all this stuff. Check what I was going to say about that. Anything else? Nope. Government's also getting interested in it. I thought this was an amazingly fun front of a House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee report. I think that's one of the sort of sexiest covers I've come across. And what they said is that the government's changed the system to end the throwaway society action before the end of this parliament. And that was February 2019. So that might happen. The government did produce a response. You can imagine what was in it. It was fairly much, yes, we're going to do something, we already are, etc. The United Nations is also getting in on sustainable fashion, and they've created, across the industry, a fashion industry charter for climate action. And of course, with COVID, there are some very philosophical pieces in The Guardian and elsewhere about the response of the fashion industry to the situation. Big brands like Prada making face masks and scrubs, and discussions about, are we all going to be weaned off fast fashion? But the reason I'm interested in it, as I said, is that because I work with teenagers, my concerns about teenagers as with climate change and other environmental issues, their prospects are slightly worrying, and there are potential impacts on their mental health. And when I'm teaching them about sustainability, fashion is one of the most kind of positive stories that we can talk about. It's empowering for them at their age group, it's fun, and there's loads of potential jobs, and not just for sort of textile designers and those interested in fashion, but also chemists and physicists and all sorts of other people who are getting involved in finding solutions to our fashion problems. So just a little bit about my favourite brands. Where are we on time? It's the clock. Okay. So I'm a bit outdoorsy, so I like Patagonia. We wave. Anybody wearing Patagonia or like Patagonia? These environmentalists always like Patagonia. They're great. If you haven't been on their website, do go and have a look, because they're campaigning about Black Lives Matter and pollution, air pollution in Los Angeles and all sorts of fun stuff. And they're very into being carbon neutral. They're down as all from Very Happy Ducks. They using a lot of recycled bottles and all sorts of recycled plastics. And once your Patagonia gets a hole in it, you can send it back to them. So Patagonia are great. I don't wear Stella McCartney, but she cannot be ignored in this whole discussion, because she really has been leading the way on sustainable fashion for some time, has been pulling the rest of the industry with her, doing lots on the types of fabrics that they use, from sustainable cashmere, recycled plastics, wool, vegetarian leather, and I'll come back to some of those. So this is another of my favourite brands, just because they make my socks, breathable bamboo socks. They also very into wearing and to use lots of different fabrics. Also an interesting website. But there are lots of others which you may not have heard of. You have to be a Guardian fashion journalist to know about these. So most of these are taken from articles in The Guardian. They're all really lovely people doing lovely things with thinking about where their fabrics come from. Not many of them doing something on sort of end of life side of things, but certainly very interested in organic cotton and that kind of thing. So there's lots of choice. It's not all sort of really high price either. It's very kind of achievable fashion for this. If anybody's interested in what any of those are, I've got notes, but I won't go into it now. You can ask me. So what about reusing clothes though, once you've bought them? Marks and Spencer's do planner swapping with Joanna Lumley there. So you can take back your old clothes. H&M do the same thing. Marks and Spencer stuff goes to Oxfam. I think Oxfam is inundated. I think they're oversupplied with our old clothes. A lot of it goes to these old clothes that go to get shipped abroad and slightly swamp the local fabric tailoring market. So it's not always a good story, but anyway, it's better than nothing. But there are lots of new companies who are trying to get us to perhaps not buy in the first place. Rent the Runway is an American company worth over $1 billion now. It's known as a unicorn because it grew so quickly in 10 years. You can rent lovely fashion items, same from Her Collective in the UK, Front Row, or you could swap. Swishing will organise a party for you, so you can swap your fashion with your friends. With ThreadUp, you can send your fashion back and they'll tart it up and they'll sell it for you, and you get 75% of the profits, I think. And in London, they're putting clothes banks everywhere to either swap or resell your old clothes for charity. So there's lots of activity going on in the reuse the reuse and sort of resharing of clothing. This is one of my favourites. It's Swap It Up. It was started by a group of teenagers, this young lady in particular, and her friends, and they are encouraging kids in other schools to do swap it ups, to bring all their clothes in and swap them with their friends. And I'm hoping to get this going in some of the local schools here in Oxford. So what about buying new though? So I was doing a bit of research on this, and weirdly it popped up on as a topic on Women's Hour on Monday on Radio 4 in the UK, talking about the fact that some tech companies have enabled you to build your own avatar. You can put your dimensions into the system and I guess your hair colour and etc., and then you have your own avatar and you can try on clothes virtually, and that means you don't have to buy as many because you'll know the ones that don't look good, and you don't have to return them, which has its own sort of environmental impact in its own right. In fact, huge environmental impact. Oops. Yeah. So yeah, avatars. Some companies are allowing you to send your old clothes back to them. So this company, Rapa Nui, they'll do that. They've set up this system called T-Mill, so you can return an item to them, and to incentivise you, you can get £5 store credit. Quite a good idea, paying people to bring their clothes back to you. But of course, there's a problem with recycling things like cotton because the fibre length shortens every time you recycle it, and so you have to put virgin material into it as well. So it's good, but it's not a complete solution. Mud Jeans are a really interesting company. They're based in the Netherlands, and you can rent your jeans. So they're mixing up the rental model. So you pay a monthly subscription, and you can send your jeans back when you're bored of them, or get some more, a different style. And then when they're worn out, they will take them apart, and they put a huge amount of effort into the taking apart and putting them back together technology. Particularly trying to sort out the problem that indigo dye is super toxic, and so they have to take the dye out and put it back in again. So there's been lots and lots of technological developments going on with them, and they've got some really good stats about how much water and energy and things they've solved, they've reduced. So tech, very excited by tech. This is the brand that really got me interested in sustainable fashion. These are my son's feet in his sea plastic trainers from Adidas. Adidas did a kind of mashup with Parley for the Oceans, which is a charity concerned about turtles getting caught in nets. They got lots of nets out of the ocean, and they worked for about 10 years on getting the technology to make it into yarn and then they started making it into trainers, which initially were sea coloured and now black, and sea coloured. So that's really exciting. That's a cool enough fashion to be worn by a 16-year-old. More tech. So cotton uses a huge amount of space and chemicals and water to grow. A better product is something called Tencel, which is new, which is made out of wood. And this is being used in an awful lot of brands. And I put some of them here, but they've got 181 brands there listed on their website that are using wood for your clothing. Apparently it feels really nice. I haven't felt any. This one's even more fun. This lady used to work in leather fashion until she found out where the leather came from, and then she was so horrified that she decided to make it out of pineapples instead. So she makes, or her company does, makes leather out, or leather look-alike out of pineapple leaves, which is a waste product. You too could look like this, and these materials look sumptuous. I haven't felt them, but maybe Stephen has. Modern Meadow, another sort of place for the chemists to go. They're actually building something which looks fabulous, doesn't it? I haven't felt any of that either, but it's built from molecules. There's the science bit. So they're building it up from square one. So that's a really fun website as well. Bolt threads are mimicking what spiders do. So they make silk from spider web. Sorry, not spiders. No spiders were harmed in the making of this silk. And here's Stella getting in on the act with Adidas as well, with a nice micro silk tennis dress. They're also into fake leather. They're making it out of fungi, mushrooms, well, sort of mushroom type thing. And here's Stella with a lovely fake mushroom bag. Econil is using waste. Here's another poor turtle wrapped up in netting. They're taking waste nylon and making it into new thread. And this company, Napapiri, I've been practicing that, I always get it wrong. They make a jacket that is all made of the same product. So the zips and the poppers and things are all made of Econil. So when they're at the end of life, they can just go straight back. It all just gets chucked in the machine, however it works. So it's easy to recycle rather than having to take it apart. Really cutting edge, this appeared fairly recently in The Guardian. Post-carbon fashion, what a great name. I don't think they're on the market yet, but they're trying to create t-shirts and fashion which actually absorb carbon dioxide. There's some chemistry, they're chemists. Arc Roma, this is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, pointed this one out. These are the best dye manufacturers, apparently. Dye is really, really polluting, and these guys have nailed ways of making dye a lot more environmentally friendly, and that's being used by lots of manufacturers. And of course, it isn't all clothes. Lab-grown diamonds are replacing, for those who are not too fussy about where the diamonds come from, those that are being dug up and processed in dreadful conditions around the world. So that's better. There's a company called Qubits that is making glasses, loads of glasses go into landfill, glass frames. What do you do with your glass frames when you've done with them? They just get thrown away. Well, these people are trying to make them also out of all sorts of different materials, including corn husks. Pozu make vegan shoes. I just like that because they're shoes and they're the best sort of eco shoes. And Lush, of course, you can buy your cosmetics without plastic. So fashion is more than just clothes, which is basically the point of that slide. So what do we do as individuals? Well, we can buy less. We can buy from responsible brands. We can think about the fabrics, buy more recyclable fabrics, single fabrics, returnable ones. We can think about buying lower impact fabrics, or we could rent our products. If we buy something, we could commit to wearing it more than 30 times, as a more than 30 times wearing campaign. We could swap them, or we could return them for recycling. That's probably the last thing we want to do. Every time I think about this, there is a little sort of bit in my head which thinks about economics, and that is it really going to be possible for a circular or sustainable fashion industry to contribute to GDP and better distribute wealth along the supply chain? I think that's got to be one of the end points, because otherwise it's just not going to work quite as well, is it? Then we can discuss that. If you want to know more, these are some of my sources. Ellen MacArthur Foundation, lots of interesting stuff on their website, and RAP, as I mentioned. There's this really great thing on iPlayer at the moment called Fashion Conscious. This lady is a vlogger, Grace Mandeville, and she's got little 5-minute blogs about different aspects of sustainable fashion. Story of Stuff is a really good website. True Cost film is really good, and this is a brilliant book. Fashionopolis, got it here, which I really enjoyed reading. Over to Stephen.
So hi, my name is Stephen Cawley. I've given, Kim said, make sure you introduce yourself. So there you go. There's an introduction on the screen, which hopefully you can circulate and people can see. But in brief, I've been involved in retail now for 30 years, over 30 years, I should say. All of that time with John Lewis. And in that time have covered many roles. From running shops to buying to running the product safety and standards side. And then for the final 7 years of my time, I was the head of sustainability, the first head of sustainability for John Lewis. For those of you outside the UK who don't know, John Lewis is a sort of, we like to call ourselves a sort of mid to up market department store group. We also have our sister company, Waitrose, which is our food operation. Also in my time, I've served as district councillor in my area where I live, over here in Huntingdonshire near Cambridge, another great university city. And I'm also a trustee and director of the Reuse Network, which is a national charity, an umbrella organisation for a body of over 300 independent furniture and appliance reuse charities. My contact details are there. I'd be really happy to hear from anyone on anything I say tonight or anything else that you'd like to pick my brain on. So Kim had sort of asked me to talk to you a bit about the journey that John Lewis has been on. Some of the stats that Kim has shared with you, you'll hear again. I found a different stat on, I think it's 2.5 years it takes us to drink all that water, Kim, but I probably don't drink as much as you're drinking, so hey. But first of all, in John Lewis, we took a stand, took a stop to look at what is the state of play in fashion. And we came up with sort of these headlines, if you like. Pollution, and Kim's already mentioned some of this. Fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world. There is overproduction as well, and Kim's already alluded to that. 150 billion garments every year. And RAP tell us there's about £30 million worth of unworn garments sitting in all of our wardrobes. And I hate to say it, ladies, it's probably more to do with you than it is to do with us gents, because a lot of the stats I find relate to the female of the species. Disposal was the other issue. We know about 50% of the clothes that are bought are disposed of within the first year. They may be that you wear them once and you throw them away because you don't want to wash, or you're bored very quickly. And nearly 13 million tonnes of clothes go to landfill every year. And as Kim already said, very few of that is ever recycled. In terms of waste, we know that it is a very wasteful industry. In terms of production, the fashion industry produces about 92 million tonnes of textile waste every year. Now that will also include home textiles. It doesn't break it down for fashion. And then the environmental impact, the water use. And as I said, I got 2.5 years worth of drinking water, but it's a lot of water nonetheless. And then finally, there's obviously the social impact. And again, Kim has touched on that, so I won't repeat that. So that was the state of play. That was what we were facing. And it really was a matter of what do we do about that? Now, John Lewis isn't a fast fashion business, but that doesn't mean that we can ignore the fact that we also contribute to the challenges in this space. What we also were really interested in understanding was how consumption patterns are changing. And I know I've read many of the same articles, probably in The Guardian, that many of you have read, and we're all hopeful that from out of COVID, things will have changed. And I suspect things will have changed. But it won't be that it will change for everyone, because what we've got to remember is an awful lot of people can't afford to shop at Stella McCartney or some of those lovely brands that Kim highlighted. And I love them all very much, but the reality is most people will be shopping at those mid-priced retailers in the high street, and they can't afford to go to where some of us could. Anyway, consumption is changing. 2/5 of boomers, I'm part of the boomer generation, as I suspect we might have a few more boomers with us, all say we're willing to pay more for products that are made in a sustainable way. That's great for us boomers, but for the other generations who don't have the incomes that we have, there's the challenge, and that's why we probably do see some of those queues, not to excuse it. Brand loyalty, again, 2/3 of consumers when asked say that they would shop more regularly with a brand or with a retailer if they believed that there was a recycling program offered for fashion, or that brand was taking the necessary steps to minimize the impact. The environmental impact, yeah, 60% of the under 24s, these are probably the youngsters who are coming in your summer schools, Kim, 60% say they prefer to buy their clothing from companies that are trying to reduce their impact on the environment and are doing the right thing. Whatever that might be, but doing what they believe to be right. There's the social impact. The most Gen Zers will not buy from companies or brands that do not align with their values, and that's something that every retailer has got to start thinking about, because they are going to be the customers of the future. And obviously, the social impact sorry, that's what I've just said, social impact with the Gen Zers. And so we then came to the whole thing around second-hand. Now, for a brand like John Lewis, which is renowned, as I say, that middle market, middle England sort of customer, the thought of second-hand when we got to this point was just anathema to us. But some of the research was really enlightening. Baby boomers and millennials, believe it or not, are the two generations that are inclined most to buy second-hand in the UK today. Very closely followed by the Gen Zers, the 18 to 24-year-olds. We already know the youngsters are doing this, so many of them are already using Depop and other ways of swapping clothes and selling and buying secondhand. We found out that the secondhand market, and this is globally, should be worth about $51 billion in about 5 years' time. As a retailer and a businessman, we were very interested in what we could do to actually start tapping into that. And that also backed up with the fact that a quarter of those who buy luxury brands, so I suspect the Stella McCartneys of this world, are also happy to shop at secondhand and resale. Really got us thinking, what could we do in this space? And also, as a retailer, we always look at what our competitors are up to. And I've just got a few examples here very quickly of what some other brands are up to in this space. You've got people like H&M, their Paris flagship, which is the image that's behind this. Their Paris flagship, the whole top floor is given over to something called Take Care services, which includes repair, customization, and refreshing. And obviously, we know that H&M will take back the old clothes as well. Nike, the circular trainer, and all the work that they've done there around training their designers in circularity. Selfridges, at the time in terms of retail, they had a 3-month vintage collaboration with Depop, and I don't know if any of you saw that, but it was a very much aimed at engaging that much younger customer. Zalando, another retailer, launched something called the Recycle Collection, and they're working with third parties and basically taking their overstocks and having them remodeled, remade into something that is actually more saleable than perhaps having to destroy the overstock or the old season. Some of the leaders, as far as I'm concerned, and you'll be glad to see Patagonia's on there, Kim. Zara, and they have an ambition to be 100% sustainable or circular materials by 2025, which is even faster than people like H&M who are saying 2030. If they can do that, that'd be great. And it would really set the benchmark for other retailers to have to follow. North Face, they offer a lifetime warranty on all their products, which, again, a bit like Patagonia, but if anything goes wrong with that product, they'll either replace it or repair it as good as new. ASOS, they launched ASOS Marketplace as far ago as 2010. Now, whatever we might think about ASOS and the ethics of fast fashion, they recognise their customer wants to swap, to buy second-hand, and is willing to do that, and therefore set up marketplace. Adidas, their circular footwear, sorry, I said Nike, it was Adidas. And then Patagonia, a fantastic stat that I came across. Their repair centre keeps upward of 50, has kept upwards of 50,000 items from landfill. And I don't know if you've checked out, any of you checked out their website. You can shop their reconditioned products on their website. So if you can't afford full price like me, you can buy secondhand and feel good about it. And then, so where that got us to in our thinking was very much there's an opportunity here. Nearly two-thirds of British women say they're happy to buy second-hand clothes, and that's only getting bigger, as you can see. 1 in 3 16 to 24-year-olds have a Depop account. They've got 13 million users. So the consumer is moving in this space. The market is growing, and there's a market being created in this space. So that whole e-commerce market, and that's what we call it, is growing faster than general retail, 23 times faster. And it will be bigger than fast fashion by 2027 is what's been predicted. Whether COVID might have put a dent in that timeline, who knows? But certainly that will be encouraging to see when it happens. And obviously WRAP, I've already mentioned, tell us we've got £30 billion worth of clothes hanging in our wardrobes. John Lewis had already run a very small pilot, probably getting on for nearly 2 years ago now, with a third party on a take-back scheme, which was all app-based. And we saw from that, you know, the average customer spend went up when they had the buyback voucher. 87% said they would use the GL app. Now, from a retailer perspective, that's what we wanted. We wanted to drive traffic to the app. We wanted to give customers, you know, value for money and give them a reason to shop with us. And so that was music to our ears. And 95% said this feature would make them shop with us more often. Every retailer wants to hear that, and therefore it was a bit of a no-brainer when we then took it to the next level and started talking about circularity. I'll skip this slide because I think it's best that we just jump right onto this next one here. What we came up with was a plan, and we've only seen one part of this plan put into play at the moment. But we came up with a full plan that said we ought to, as a retailer, be offering repairs and activation. So repair service should happen. Selling vintage clothing. Now, it took us probably a good 12 months to convince our fashion buying director that selling second-hand clothing, called vintage, of course, was a goer. But when we started showing her the numbers, she was really interested in what could happen there. We also need to offer reworked, and then obviously some sort of recycling, because not everything we're ever going to get back can be either resold or repurposed, and will have to be recycled. What we said here was the turnkey opportunity to really understand all of this was the buyback opportunity, which is what we launched back in October, November last year in John Lewis in Oxford. And for those of you who weren't aware, I'll just briefly run through what that meant. It meant that you could bring back any John Lewis branded or any brand that we stocked in menswear or womenswear for the trial. We were planning to run this for 6 weeks. In the end, it carried on and is still carrying on in Oxford once the shop reopens. The clothing collected through the scheme would be processed, and we'd ensure that nothing goes to landfill. It was only open to MyJL customers, so that's customers who have our loyalty scheme. And again, it was a way of activating our most loyal customers to start seeing us in a different light. And we invited them to participate. It also enabled us to be able to track what was going on and the sorts of things that we needed to understand to make this trial a success. And we wanted to measure what it did in terms of brand affinity, what we call net promoter score, footfall, customer acquisition, and incremental sales, obviously. I'm glad to say that it was a roaring success, so much so that in February, John Lewis announced that they would roll it into 5 more shops this year, which they did. And then sadly, obviously, as we know, the shops all had to close. But I understand it will be up and running again as soon as we're able to do that. And in fact, in those 5, we decided to trial it in a Waitrose store. But what then and why did we do this in Oxford? Well, These guys, now many of you will have hopefully visited Waitrose and Botley Road, and you'll have seen what they did. Now we are part of the same organisation, Waitrose and John Lewis, but we have a friendly rivalry. And I tell you, when I saw what they had done on Botley Road, I was spitting feathers. It was fantastic. And they basically jumped in. They decided to do what they needed to do in terms of responding to customer expectation and demand. And they learned on the job, so much so they've now rolled this into more shops. I think most of the Waitroses in the Oxfordshire area have now been unpacked. And I understand it's something that they're looking to take more widely. So when we saw what they had done, we really had to look at what we could do. And Oxford seemed to be the right place to do it, given the response that Waitrose had to their experiment in Oxford. And so we launched, along with our buyback, and it was one of the 8 initiatives that we decided to launch in John Lewis Oxford. We removed all single-use carrier bags, those lovely 5p carrier bags, and we offered customers reusable bags, or they could bring their own bags. There was a lot of nervousness in JL headquarters about that. Oxford customers were not phased at all and were very happy to see the back of 5p plastic carrier bags. So we removed all our carrier bags. We also replaced all of the bubble wrap. You can imagine we use a ton of bubble wrap, and I've got a stat here. The bubble wrap usage in Oxford for a full year was 600 kilos of bubble wrap. And one of my colleagues, I don't know if you measured this out, if you laid it out on a line from the front door of our shop in Oxford, you would reach Bicester Village and some in terms of the mileage that would have covered. So it was important that we replaced that. We already recycle all their own plastic and wooden hangers, and we decided customers should bring us back all their old hangers as well. We'd gladly get rid of them for them. And so we introduced that. At the same time, we launched Beauty Cycle, and you can see the image there of Beauty Cycle, and that was in partnership with TerraCycle. All those containers for bushy products are terribly difficult to recycle. TerraCycle are great guys. They've worked out lots of different ways to recycle stuff. So you could bring back your empties, be rewarded for that, and take that off your next purchase. Again, we trialled that in Oxford, and it's now it went into 36 of our shops, all the shops that have beauty halls. Obviously. We removed customer collection packaging. Most of you, if you've ever tried to collect a parcel from us, will find it wrapped in lots of plastic or in a cardboard box. And we said to customers in Oxford, either we can unwrap it for you here and we'll dispose of that, which they're very happy to do. And we also in Oxford trialled a reusable plastic container, and that's what you can see in the image in the bottom corner there. That really was to understand how we needed to change operations to make that work. And I understand it helped us understand what we'd have to do. And that's not gone live yet, because that effectively has a knock-on effect to how we operate our DC and distribution. And then finally, and we also offered eco deliveries in the Oxford area, which again, there was a big uptake for that. And then, as I say, fashion buyback, which was the thing that we were most proud of. There was a lot of scepticism about it, if I'm honest. A lot of scepticism in our head office as to whether our customers would be willing to do this, whether they'd be interested. But I'm happy to say it worked very well. So much so, as I say, we've rolled it out. What we did find, and this might not surprise you, but what we did find was the quality of the garments that come back from John Lewis customers are generally a very good quality. We end up with a lot of branded goods coming back, and that enabled us to understand the volumes we could have potentially to set up vintage departments within some of our shops. And I know that the plan always was that later this year at some stage we'd have our first vintage department. Now whether that will now happen, sadly, I don't know. So that was the journey that we went on, and how buyback fitted in, the fashion buyback fitted in with a wider plan of take back. So I've just noticed that I've got an image there of some sofas, and you'll be wondering what's that got to do with anything. We also offer a sofa recycling service for all our customers. So when you buy a nice new sofa from us, most often customers don't know what to do with the old sofa. Your council might charge you lots of money to take it away, and through a partnership with the Reuse Network and local charities, John Lewis customers for the last 4 or 5 years have now been donating their old sofas to people who can't afford to buy brand new, nice new sofas in places like John Lewis. And I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you so much. Can I just ask you, you know what you told us about the company that was actually upcycling the clothing?
Sorry, say again, the company that was actually upcycling?
You had a company that was upcycling the clothing.
The clothing, yes. Yeah, let me just find, they're in my notes and I forgot to mention their name. Oh yes, it was on that slide. So we were working with, what are they called? No, we worked with Renewcell on the recycling side. We were working with, 1 minute, the name is here, Vogue and...
Was it one in India?
No, in the end we didn't work with them. That didn't come through. Sorry, I'll find it and come back to you if you don't mind. I can't find it in my notes now. I can't find it in my notes.
Stephen, we've got, Rebecca's been looking at the questions on the chat, Stephen and Kim. We wondered if for the next 10 minutes Rebecca will fire you with these questions that have come up on the chat. There's been some really interesting things, so.
Very happy.
I'll hand over to Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Alison, and thank you everyone for these amazing questions. Apologies in advance because I'm not going to be able to put all of them to Kim and Stephen. And the first question, Stephen, is the real killer one. Shouldn't we just consume less? Isn't overconsumption at the roots of the problems with both pollution and social injustice of the fashion industry? Doesn't it also create the kinds of overwhelm in the charity sector, the charity shops and so on that you were touching on with the upcycling scheme? So what can we say to that?
Sorry, I don't understand the second part of what you were saying there about the charity shop. Could you?
So one of the questions, this is me trying to combine two questions into one. The basic question is, shouldn't we just consume less? One aspect of that is pollution, another aspect is social injustice. The third aspect is there's so much second-hand clothing in the system that our charity shops are being overwhelmed and far too much is going over to landfill.
Right. So personally, I think, yeah, you're right. We should just consume less. But the reality is, we can't force people to consume less. I worked for a retailer, and it's their job to, sell you the stuff that you might want, need, or just desire. And given we live in a system that, a capitalist system that allows that to happen, then, you'll always have businesses who can do it. So I would say that it's for each of us individually to make that decision. I think the interesting thing around the charity sector, and you're right, one of the questions we were asked at the time is, weren't we taking stuff from the charity sector effectively? But you're right, we know the charity sector is already overwhelmed. What we were interested in looking at is how do we make sure that something that has still got life in it, that can still serve a purpose, that avoids somebody buying something brand new, and therefore the impacts that all of that has, how do we put that in the hands of people who might want to buy that? And so we were specifically looking at the better quality, the better end of the products that would appeal to our customers. From our perspective, it solves the landfill problem. We make some money on it, and it helps us meet increasingly the obligations that we may have as a retailer under law. But yeah, I agree. Individually, we ought to. I noticed in Kim's slide, she you didn't call it out, but it was on there, Thrift Plus. I've done some work with those guys. I'm one of their shoppers now. And if you've not tried out Thrift Plus, I'll give them a plug, because I think a great place to shop. And that's also helping charity, but at the same time, ensuring that good quality clothes are not going to landfill.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Stephen. And I've got a question that I think either of you could answer, but I'm going to direct it at Kim. There's a lot of kind of strong concern, I think, in the questions about how do we know, how do we find out what is what are sustainable materials, how the whole supply chain works, how can we trust the information we get? And people have been sharing good information about places to look and ways to test it out. But I wondered if you'd like to share with us your sense of what consumers can do to get reliable information to make those difficult decisions about not just materials, but about where they've come from and how people were treated and all of that.
Mm. Yeah, it's a $1 million question, isn't it? And not just with fashion, but with food and everything. You know, labelling is very difficult. I think as a consumer, we shouldn't beat ourselves up. If you go for something which, you know, it says it's organic cotton because it says it's organic cotton, then good on you. Because even if you're being cheated, then, you know, the retailer's getting the message that, you know, that's what consumers want. So I think just do your best and don't beat yourself up about it, and perhaps buy a bit less and swap some stuff with your friends. If I can pick up on the question that the previous one on the should we buy less overall, I think this is a much bigger question. That's my last slide was about, you know, can we have a functioning economy / society if we all consume less? And it isn't just about fashion, it's about everything. You know, the environmental problems that we have are to do with excess consumption. And yet, our government is very busy pushing us all to go out and consume to get the economy going again. And so, any sort of thoughts about a Green New Deal or whatever in the UK and elsewhere is out the window. So I think there's got to be some really deep thinking about how we redistribute resources. And I don't think it's about kickstarting an economy. I think it's about how we redistribute resources. Worth looking at Kate Rayworth's work for more on this. I think it's a very interesting area.
Great. Yes, thank you. And thank you to both of you for that difficult question. So I have another question for Stephen, which is, again, I'm combining two questions, and the focus is what's in it for the fashion industry to step up and to collaborate, to work together to address this massively complex system and to reduce its impact. What are the motivators to do this, and will they step up? And you might like to start, Stephen, with what was in it for John Lewis.
That's it. Wow, yeah. I can speak from a retail perspective, so it will be very. I couldn't possibly speak on behalf of the wider fashion industry, but I suspect the same things will apply. So what was in it for John Lewis? Well, every business is looking to make sure it secures the spend from the customers. We've all got X amount of pounds in our wallets and our purses, and every retailer's out there to try and get as much of that spend from you as they can and not let it go somewhere else. The days of just piling it up and selling it cheap and giving you 2-for-1s and all the rest of it doesn't work. So it's about how do you then perceive the brand and how do you feel towards the brand. And you talk to the marketers, and I worked a lot with the marketing team, they talk very much about the emotional response you have to a brand and the relationship you have to that brand. So all the things that brand does in terms of the relationship it has with you, it does for you, hopefully builds warmth, builds trust, builds that loyalty that then makes you want to spend more pounds. So that's, to be honest, that's where it started from. But what is interesting from a retail perspective, and when you're a buyer, and I sat as a buyer, and I would talk to my buyers, they think they're the only ones who find the very best factory on the planet, and therefore they don't want to tell anybody what they're up to. And then I visited factories all the time, and I could see John Lewis production going through, and the next line Marks and Spencer production going through, and various other brands going through, both UK and US brands going through. And so actually what's in it for us as retailers, because we're all using those same factories, because we're all pretty much making the same stuff, in terms of the conversations that then have to happen around either the social issues or using better production methods that is using less water, using fewer resources, whatever, by clubbing together. And we did this. So the ETI, the Ethical Trading Initiative, we was a great model. We did that from a social perspective. Increasingly, we were sitting around the table in various round tables, and I sat and represented JL in various round tables where my peers from other retailers would be there, and we would have those discussions about how do we make sure X factory that we're all using to make Y product is now sourcing, you know, sustainable cotton, is now doing something in a better way around waste or whatever. Ultimately, by doing that, we all gain. There's because the more of that you can save, the more margin, if you like, from a retail perspective there is, the lower the cost. But the equitable sharing of that saving and that gain has to be what it's about. So it's not just the retailer that makes the gain, but the factory owners and therefore the workers ultimately who benefit from that. And that's where the power of big brands like John Lewis, M&S, you know, some of the other big names who are playing in the space, H&M and others, do collaborate increasingly behind the scenes to make sure that we can influence that side of it, because there's a financial gain for us and them.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question, and it is it's about the other aspects of shopping for clothes, shopping for anything really. In Oxford, as you've been describing, Stephen, we have a John Lewis, which is the flagship store of our recently opened Westgate shopping centre, a redeveloped shopping centre. The Westgate centre is huge, and it's right in the heart of the city, and it has 1,000 car parking spaces. The people accessing those car parking spaces has been the cause of quite a lot of pollution and congestion on the roads around the centre. So I'm not going to put a question of kind of like, what are you going to do about this? Because not least because you're no longer with John Lewis, but it raises questions, doesn't it, about how people will shop in future and how can we shop? How can we access the stuff we want to buy in ways that don't kind of inadvertently add to the carbon footprint through our own actions, never mind what the retailers and producers have done. So what's the kind of future of the high street and shopping centres?
I'm glad you didn't want me to solve the issue of Westgate shopping. I think it's interesting, and I think for all that we hear about, things will change, I think things will change. And I'll tell you why I think that. I mean, before COVID and the lockdown, John Lewis, and I'm sure other retailers will quote you similar figures, on average, getting on for almost half of our sales were coming from through the online platform. And whether that was being delivered direct to door or you were picking it up at your Waitrose shopping, more and more of our customers were doing that because we understand that that's an easy way, it's a convenient way for us all to shop. That will only increase, and I think we've seen that through lockdown. When that's for many of us, that's the only way we've been able to shop. If we were shopping, so I think it's only going to increase that. Kim's already touched on AI. I think AI in terms of how Kim described it, avatars, absolutely. But increasingly, it will be used in manufacturing. It will be used in distribution. It will start making life much easier. So ultimately, will you need to go to a shopping centre? Probably not. And I know before I left John Lewis, that we were already having that conversation. What do we do with these big shops that we've got dotted around the country, some too big now for modern retail? Do we give some of that space back? Yeah, and we're right-sizing some of our shops. But do we put more into those shops that become much more of to make it much more of a community hub, a social space, a place that people come together to take some classes, to have a meal, and to shop? Therefore, making sure that when you do get in the car to come there, it's not just to go and buy something, but it's something else, and it probably is cutting out a car journey somewhere else. Now, whether that day will ever come remains to be seen, but I know that was the way people were thinking as we went into this lockdown period.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Kim. Thank you both very much indeed. And again, thanks everyone for your great questions, and I'm sorry I couldn't put them all. I'm going to hand back to Alison.
Thank you all very much, and we will be in touch. I am absolutely sure. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye.